Thank you so much. It's been quite a few years since I first got involved with this collection, but what I want to do today is kind of go into the background of how I got involved and how this collection got started and how it got kind of rebooted. I thought I would start up by just kind of telling you who I am. I'll try to make this short. I got my BA in music, in violin and voice from Oakland University. And when I was at Oakland University, I got very, very interested in art history. So I took a lot of art history classes. After I graduated, I finished a major in art history at Wayne State. And then later on, took enough credits to have a major in history, and finally got my master's degree in educational leadership. So I've been involved in really the arts my whole life, and trying to force kids to like it. In front of this building is a little house, and you know it as the Owl House. It's a store. That's the Breuckman House. You can see it, and this is a very old picture of Saugatuck, and it shows you that that house has been here a long time. One of the things that's fascinating is there really aren't trees. It's one of the interesting things about the town, and this is in the time when they were doing shipbuilding and logging, and there you can see the Breuckman House. That's that Owl House that's in front, but kind of pay attention to what's behind it. There's nothing behind it. There's a photo of the Breuckman House with a buggy in front of it. It's the last house on the right. You can see that nothing was paved there. Actually, the street doesn't look that much different now, really. I mean, I'm talking about the buildings. Yeah, the buildings, you probably recognize what's there. We're going to talk about the Breuckman sisters. And I'm going to talk about Susan Breuckman Arnold first. She actually married a Mr. Arnold and was involved in the Arnold line up at Mackinac Island. Minnie apparently stayed here in the house. Notice that she died in 1934. And actually, two pleasant women, really, and obviously very, very interested in the community. Here is a part of Minnie Breuckman's will, which was in 1934. And I'm not going to read it to you, but it pretty much talks about she leaves her house, which is that Owl House in front. She leaves that house to the Women's Club, actually a group that is going to oversee it. And she left them some money, and one amount of it was going to be used to develop the house and whatever, and then the rest was going to go into trust so that they could get income off of it, and sort of pay the expenses. Notice again, there is that little Owl House, or the Breuckman House. The reason this picture is in here is take a look behind the house. There's that big empty lot. That also is part of what Minnie Breuckman left. And you're on that lot right now. Okay, so that's how the Women's Club acquired this property. Again, in 1934. By 1936, they had drawings done for a building here. Thomas Eddy Tallmadge, who was a very, very well-known architect in Chicago, happened to summer out here, was very involved with Oxbow, and in fact, you've heard of Tallmadge Woods, all of that. He was really the one that financed Oxbow, Tallmadge did. So I don't know, it's one of the things I don't know if he was paid for that or if he did it gratis. I don't know. Okay, so it was gratis. Thank you for that. So this is the drawing he did for the building you're in. Notice on the left end here, you've got that little Owl House, or the Breuckman House. And then there's that entrance you were in, and there's the auditorium. So these drawings were done in 36. By 1938, the building was finished. Okay, So, but I think that the women, they wouldn't move into it till it was paid off. And notice that this would have been one of his last things because he died 2 years later. Okay, that's the architect. But here you see a photo of the house kind of the way we're used to seeing it, and then the auditorium behind it. Now what's interesting is, here it is, it's the Breuckman House Library and Women's Club. One of the things that the Women's Club did back then is they started a library because there wasn't one here, and that was in that owl house. But also, they started hanging paintings because there was really no art museum here either. And you can see here's the sign that was at the Breuckman Homestead Art Exhibits and Public Library, and it says owned and operated by the Saugatuck Women's Club. That's really how this collection got started. People come in here and they say, gee, all this stuff is here and it's wonderful. Well, it didn't just walk in the door. Okay, so there was this interest in sharing it with the community, and different members started donating. And it built really what's kind of a phenomenal collection. One of the people who was, well, one of my favorite people that I've ever known, actually, Jane Van Dis, who was a past president here. She was an absolute character, really, really fun. And it was Jane, actually, I was visiting her one day. I used to go over, and she was kind of a buddy of mine, and I would just sit and listen to her talk because she had so many stories to tell. And she was talking about the art collection at the Women's Club, and she knew that I was very, very interested in art. So she said, well, you know what? She said, and it was really cold out. This is in the middle of winter. She said, and I believe it was probably around 2010, maybe even earlier. She said, let's go over there. I've got the key. So we got in the car and we drove over here. And I don't know if any of you know that this building, I think it's better now. It used to be really cold in here in the wintertime because they didn't run the heat. And she started showing me, there were tables and chairs piled all over, but she started showing me some of the artwork. And then she said, well, you know, there's more of it in storage. You know, so anyway, I got very, very interested, well, especially because I recognized some of the names and realized the quality of what was here. So Jane and I kind of put a strategy together, and I was invited to a board meeting or whatever the Women's Club does, and kind of did a presentation talking about the art collection and, you know, the fact that it really needed some care. And what happens with, and you know, the way I like to explain it to people is when you paint your house, you know, you got to wash that paint, you know, and you know, if it's out in the elements, it's going to get damaged. And a painting is no different. It will get dirty, which is why people will sometimes put glass on the front, although that's not the best on oil. But, you know, you keep it in sort of an even temperature. You try to keep it in an even humidity so that it doesn't deteriorate for you. Actually, most of the stuff was really in pretty good condition. There were a couple of things that really needed some help. And so I got the History Center involved a little bit, and we tried to help. We got a group in called the Questers. And the Questers is, it's a group of women really that just likes to do projects. They do all kinds of, projects to help groups out or whatever. They came in and met with some of the women from the Women's Club and kind of explained that, you know, yes, it's expensive to maintain an art collection, et cetera, but by doing certain things, they could become a 501c3. And then they would be allowed to take donations and people could write them off and they would be able to start raising money. So it kind of planted a seed, and then after that, the women took over really here, and it's phenomenal how far this group has come. Okay, we'll talk about the collection. I've already, I wanted to point out you're not going to see everything in the collection in this presentation. Okay, I kind of went through and tried to pick highlights, and there are different reasons why things are in here, but really look around, and my hope really is that this presentation can maybe help in the cataloging, although it has been cataloged. The women have done that, it's been cataloged, but this would be a nice beginning for a little pamphlet or something. You know what I mean? For the future that could be sold. Just because it is such a unique collection. And it's unique for these reasons. Number one, most of the stuff is local. Okay, so that makes it a very special, it's very unique to this community. Second, a lot of it was donated by members. But a lot of it is stuff that the members themselves created. And that, again, makes it a very, very unique collection. I put this in here again, and this is where I have Tallmadge's dates, because number one, you are in the masterpiece that this group owns. This building, architecture is a work of art, and this is a masterpiece building. And especially in the context of a little town, you know, of this size, to have something this important. And it's been wonderful for me to watch over the last 10 years or so how the painting got done. There's been a lot of repairs done. It's just been a marvelous job completely bringing this back. But also, you've got the original drawing. This is a work of art also, and this is out in the lobby, and you can actually see how beautifully drawn this is. And of course, that's the building you're in. This was done by Tallmadge in 1936. He would have probably done that. This is also Thomas Eddy Tallmadge. Tallmadge was known also as a printmaker, but he did paintings too. This is one of the coolest paintings in the collection, really, and this is an area out at Oxbow called the Crow's Nest. And, you know, what it represents is a great big dune, and of course there's this little cottage at the top of it, but he does this wonderful thing in the front with a little bit of grasses and a little bit of a twig or a tree growing or something trying to grow, and then all of this sand. So you're anchored in the front here with that grass, but you've got all that sand pulling you up to show you how high the dune is. It's very, very successful. That's an oil on canvas, and it was given by Abby Tallmadge. So I assume that was his wife, probably. Oh, his sister. Thank you. A lot of you may not know that, you know, the chain ferry, there was a little shack there at one time, and old Doc Heath and the ferrymen and all that would sit there. And this would have been on the Saugatuck side, not across the river where the pump house is. And that little shack has been painted a lot of times. But this is one that was given by Frederick Fersman to the Women's Club. And it was done by David Livingston Adams. I don't know too much about him, but he lived from 1883 to 1924. They would have acquired this quite early. But anyway, you can see the shack there, and here the posts where the ferry would actually come up to the dockside. Here's a dunescape, and this is really kind of neat because this was done by a member here, I think, Claire Allen, and she did quite a bit of art, and you know, I've seen quite a bit of her stuff. It's all good. She died in 1976, but what's interesting about this is the wonderful, first of all, the sort of mid-century feeling. You know, you can tell this was done mid-century. She does something really interesting in this because you notice the lake is way in the background and you're almost lost in this dune grass. And people that have been walking in the dunes here, it is like that. And she captures that wonderful feeling of being kind of lost in the dunes. What's interesting, if you look, she does some interesting thing with colors, with purples and all that. And I think what she's doing there is trying to capture the sunlight on it, on the white. But wonderful piece. All right, this is, probably everybody's favorite, or almost everybody's favorite artist in the area is Carl Hoerman. And Carl Hoerman was an architect and then moved to Saugatuck, and he and his wife both painted. Carl Hoerman is really, really well known here, but it's interesting because if you look him up online, Taos, New Mexico claims him too. The reason for that is that the Hoermans used to go out west every winter, and they were part of that whole Taos scene. What he is the most famous for, though, are his Grand Canyons, and they're very, very lucky to have that here, and you'll be able to walk around and see it. Carl Hoerman just really has his own style, and it has to do more with the brushwork. And I know this is one of them that was cleaned. And boy, what a difference, after it had been cleaned. But you can see what he does in the front here. You've got all the canyon. One of the things he does to create depth here is to make, the rocks in the back lighter. So you're kind of pulled in that way. But it's a nice technique the way he's got all the vegetation sort of in the front here. And that's not only because it's really like that, but it can be used as a device. Notice it's not all the way around, to kind of pull you in and give you a feeling for how large that canyon is. And he died in 1955. He was very prolific. And in fact, he lots of prints, and his stuff shows up a lot in the area. This is a Macatawa scene by Nat Steinberg, and Nat Steinberg was a commercial artist that ended up living in Douglas. His house is still there, and was very well known. He did a lot of Jewish art, especially prints. And it's kind of interesting, that and a lot of stuff in the feel of like Norman Rockwell, of families. It's like when you see him, you kind of feel like you know the people. But this is a watercolor he did obviously of the Holland area. Really, really wonderful the way he frames it, and I love the fact that he puts that spile right in the front. It's right there, you can't ignore it, but what that does is it anchors you to the front so that when you look toward those cottages and all that in the back, you really get that feeling of depth by being anchored in the front there. Really, really another treasure here to have that, and that's a watercolor. He died in 1976. Okay, we're not sure who gave that. And we're kind of guessing maybe he did, but we don't know. And then lots of research is still going on. And I know that when it was mentioned that Sue Pastor has done a lot of work, and I know Donna St. Andre did a lot of research trying to go through old records and minutes from meetings to find out exactly what the story was. Where did this come from? We're back to my friend Jane Van Dis, who also was an artist. This is Barnes on M89. I don't know if you ever thought you'd see a painting with a name like that. Jane Van Dis, I know she did study in Kalamazoo. When she was good, she was really, really good. There are some wonderful things in the community that she created. This one, it's just fun. When you look at it, you've got those buildings, they're almost scattered, and that doesn't mean they didn't really look like that. But it's just wonderful the way she's got the field in the front, and those barns, it looks like they're still being used, but they're a little beat up. And there's a water tower there. Really, really a nice composition. They're lucky to have that here. She lived from 1921 to 2017, so she hasn't been gone that long, but it was really a great loss. This is really interesting. This is a still life, and this was Adele Houser. Now, and she lived from 1870 to 1940. I just found that out. What's interesting about this painting is Adele Houser and Carl Herman put together sort of an exhibit upstairs in City Hall in Saugatuck in the 30s. And it was mostly his and her work that were in that exhibit. And the thing is, I have only ever seen two Adele Housers. One is here and one is one that I own. And it's just really, really amazing because her work is phenomenal. We almost can find out nothing about her. Part of that sometimes is, because of the way women were thought of. Often it's difficult to do research because women often change their names when they get married or something, so it can be a little bit difficult. And this is one of them that really did undergo restoration. Yeah, that was really, really beautifully restored. You'll get to see it here. This would have been late in life for her because if she died in 1940, this is so typical 30s. And this is the mill by Burton Barns. It might be Burton Barns, we're not sure. We have not been able to find out anything except that the wife was a member. And the donor was Mrs. Burton Barns, and that's just hanging right over here. There's no idea where that mill existed, except that it's just a wonderful early 20th century painting. That's one of them that kind of needs some loving, if anybody wants to donate. But a wonderful painting. Cora Bliss Taylor, well, let's start with the last thing she did. She's responsible pretty much for getting the interurban going. She was very, very active in that. So if any of you ever ride on it, understand that somebody fought for that. Cora was really a well-trained artist and moved here and started her own school on Holland Street. And actually, she had some pretty big name people from Chicago teaching there in the early days. Most people remember her as teaching children. She did a lot with children toward the end, but in the earlier days, she really, really had adults coming in and working with her. And this is an interesting piece because I've seen others like this. Number one, you can see the competence. But one of the things that Cora would do is you'll have a composition where there's like a landscape, and then with it there's something in front. And what we think she was doing is this was a demonstration in one of her classes. So she taught the kids or the students how to do the landscape, and then right on it put the other one in front. I've seen others like this. I might be wrong, but it's a theory. But this one really works. The colors are magnificent. We think it was Mrs. F.W. Crawford who gave it, but I don't think they ever nailed that down. Here's another Cora Bliss Taylor. This is the other side of the chain ferry. Okay, so the first one you saw was on the Saugatuck side. This one here is on what we would call the lakeside or the across the river, the west side. And that's the old ferry store. Jean Palmer ran that. You can see she's walking. It's probably the chain ferry or what was that iteration of it, because there were different iterations of it over the years. You've got a woman walking toward it. What I've always found fascinating about this painting is, I don't know, that must be a weeping willow because it looks like Florida. You know what I mean? So it's not a palm tree, so that's got to be a weeping willow. We're not used to seeing them anymore because they're illegal to plant. Yeah, because of what they do to the sewers. Yeah, but you can see, and what's so neat about it is typical Cora Bliss Taylor. You see those buildings in the background. Maybe they looked exactly like that, and maybe they didn't. But what I've always said about her with that type of painting, they look like a very pleasant wallpaper, and I don't mean that in an unkind way. There's just something so pleasant about the way she places them that you could imagine it being repeated, and it would work. And again, we don't know who gave that. And here's the last of the Cora Bliss Taylors. This one I know really went through a cleaning, and that this photo was taken before it was cleaned and restored. That's hanging over here. And this would be, if you wanted to say, is there a masterpiece that Cora Bliss Taylor did, I would say this is probably at least one of them. And it was kind of typical. In that period, they would do these great big paintings. That whole idea of painting a vase of flowers was common at the time, especially in the 30s. Things kind of changed after the war because they got into all the modern stuff. And it was something often that women did. A lot of women would take classes and paint these vases of flowers. Again, we don't know who gave this, but what a wonderful concept to take the piano and just put the vase of flowers on the end. Well, it's so big, but it works. It's almost like it's in the room. This is a man with a mustache. We think it's Carl Bird. Okay, we think the drawing is of Carl Bird. It was done by Ruth Turner, who lived from 1892 to 1975. Wonderful drawing when you get to see it in person. Again, we don't know who gave it, it's a drawing in watercolor. Here's another watercolor. This is I think a member again, Louise Peters, and she lived from 1911 to 1998. Wonderful kind of modernist. You can see, this was done later. Weird and wonderful color sense with the yellow and the purple. And, that could get Easter looking, and this doesn't. It really doesn't. She's able to control those colors. I love what she does with that kind of weird color in the background, too, because rather than leaving it white, it just kind of gives it a little bit of depth and a little bit of weight. And that was given by her family. And you can see how many of these things were things that were done by members and then given to preserve that history. This is a Bill Simmons photo. Bill Simmons was a well-known photographer here. We don't know who gave it. This is the site of Singapore. So a wonderful old photo. I don't know whose house that would have been. Here's another photo, and this is the Swing Bridge Causeway. And of course, for those of you who are new here, you know that the bridge that we have now went in 1936. But before that, there was a big causeway, and there were some bridges that had been moved from out east that were used on the Saugatuck end. And on the Douglas end, there was a swing bridge. It was one, in fact, there's one other swing bridge I know of up in Grand Haven. When you go over that big bridge, you can see that swing bridge on the side. And they would turn it, and then the boats could go through, and then they would turn it back. Oh, right. Yes, New Richmond has them. That you have to go there. It's a little harder to see. What's cool about this is with this photo, you can see the girl, I think it's a woman. It looks like a woman in the horse and buggy. And I really think she's coming toward Saugatuck. If you look carefully in the back there, you can kind of see there's like a structure that was part of the swing bridge. In fact, they would hang banners on it at one time, and there was, I know, an ad for a store that existed in Douglas. It was like just a commercial sign. But it looks like she's coming this way, but what's cool about it is you get the feeling of how long that causeway was. It really was. And obviously that's gone. took the dirt from that and they, I guess, created that where those condos are now next to the bridge. So, okay, we don't know who gave that, but it's kind of wonderful that it survived. This is kind of a fascinating painting to me because it's almost what would be considered outsider art. And outsider art is art that's created by artists who really probably didn't have a lot of formal training, but somehow are able to get it right. No, and and this is a beautiful example. This was done by Eugenie Parent. I have not been able to find anything about her. So, and listen, if anybody comes up with information, we're glad to get it, to get the story told. But this is the Ganji store, which I was really worried about, but it's just been kind of restored. She really captures, look at it, it's Eaton's Auto Sales. And I think there might be a phone booth there, I'm not sure. But then there's a gas pump, so it was a gas station. And I know it was a bus stop because I know somebody that used to told me about it, and it was a grocery store. I mean, it was all this stuff going on in that little building. And I think it was a post office too. So anyway, she really, really captures this in this delightful, almost naive painting, but it's really, really a treasure. And it's wonderful because, again, it's so locally specific. I mean, we know exactly what building that is. This is May Heath. May Heath was sort of like the mother of Saugatuck. They owned buildings and everything. They did all kinds of things. She wrote the history of Saugatuck, or one of them. And was she a member here? I think so. Yeah, oh, that's right. She was. Yeah, forever she was a member. But, and I know there are photos of her. I guess this was her hobby or whatever. She did a lot of painting. I've seen pictures of her living room with them all over the place. This is one of her really, really good ones. Yeah, no, this is really, really a nice one. A lot of them were, like others where they were, florals and all that. I don't know what she did when she painted, but a lot of hers tend to flake, and it just was something she did when she painted. This one has just survived so beautifully. And if you don't know what building that is, that's the old lighthouse. Was at the mouth of the Kalamazoo River before they put the cut through in. It was so sort of near the Oxbow campus. The Deems own that. And this building was destroyed in the tornado back in the 50s. And so the structure you see there now is new, or newish, and replaced that. And that building was built in 1859, so I mean, it had been there a while. Lake Michigan would be in the back, and this would be on the Kalamazoo River here, where that little boathouse is. This is like a linoleum cut or a wood cut, and this was done by Elsa Ulbricht, who was very involved out at Oxbow. Her specialty actually was weaving. She did a lot with textiles. She also did painting, and she did prints. And she was director at Oxbow for a long time. This is one of her prints, and this is one that really was an amazing restoration because it had become so faded. Now they have special glass. They can put special glass on it and no light can penetrate it. And they have new glass. It can be totally non-reflective. No matter what, you can shine a light on it and it won't reflect. Some of those things are important to do if you have artwork that you're really worried about. Artwork should never be in direct sunlight all the time, especially watercolors. Again, they don't know who gave this, but this was done when she was in Italy. I love it because it's almost got that beginning of Art Deco look. I mean, these trees going up, and those are Italian trees, but just wonderful, all the different lines and the differences in color to create this woodcut. This is also Elsa Ulbricht. This is an oil on canvas. This is at the campus of Oxbow. In the background there, you can see the hotel. And then way up here, you can see the building that's called the Red, for obvious reasons. And the girl in the ochre sweater, you know, it's interesting with this painting. This was borrowed for an exhibit at the SCA in 2010 for the 100th anniversary of Oxbow. And it was called A Passion for Painting. And I was the curator of that, one of the curators. And I went in one evening when there was a show going on, and you know, during the intermission, they let the people go into the art gallery. So I was setting it up, sitting at a table, and almost every person came in and wanted to know about it. It's just got this wonderful, wonderful feeling to it, and she's got that, you don't know if she's unhappy or if she's just trying to sit still or whatever, but it's just really, really an interesting composition. And of course, that's on that meadow at Oxbow. In the La Jolla Coast, this is Pauline Randall. And again, we don't know who gave it. It's a small watercolor. Pauline lived from 1893 to 1989. And I like this so much because it really, again, is indicative of somebody that did something and wanted the Women's Club to have it. And again, here's a member, again, adding to that collection for the other members and for the community. The big pavilion, this is a Peggy Boyce. It's kind of one of her earlier ones. She was really well known in town here, was a member here. She was very active with the History Center. She ran a little art gallery down on Water Street. She actually, in the church up behind this auditorium, she had her own little museum, and she used to change out the exhibits, and they were always good. Really, really kind of neat what she did there, and really tried to promote the arts here. And this was the big pavilion, in case you don't know, was a building on the river here, kind of next to the Butler, and it burned in 1960. It was called the brightest spot on the Great Lakes. And it was a big dance hall, and later they did roller skating in it. But anyway, she really captures it. I always love paintings that have cars in them, because cars are so hard to draw. And you know, what's interesting about this is it verges on cartoonish, but it's not. In other words, it's just, you know, you can tell she was out there, she painted it outside, and really, really captures a moment. You know, one of the things I think that's kind of cool that she captures is the height. Behind the tower over there, that's the back of the movie theater. There was a movie theater that was attached to the back of it. This is a wonderful portrait that was done by Elinor Burns, who was from Holland. This is of Mrs. Hoerman, and I purposely didn't put her right after Carl because people need to have low space sometimes, you know what I mean, and be recognized for who they are. And this is one artist painting a portrait of another artist. And this was given by Mary Sanford. You actually don't have that many portraits really here, just a few. So here's another Christiana Hoerman, and this is one of them that was done when they were out west, Southwest Still Life. And she lived from 1887 to 1986, so she outlived her husband by about 30 years almost. I like this painting because I'm very familiar with her work. And this is, I think, one of the best of hers that I've seen. They were usually flowers. This one has a lot more depth to the composition, as far as I'm concerned. It's just a little more interesting than some of them that were done. But this looks a lot better in person. It's not quite so shiny. And you'll see what she captures there. And I love what she does with that carpet, that rug in the back. It's really, really wonderful. This is a relatively newer acquisition, and this is the bandstand in Wicks Park by Cornelius Van Fulpen. This was given by Peg Sanford. And I like this because it's moving into in that, modern period, and this is a pastel. Again, it's so wonderful because that's a local landmark. It's really, really captured. You see in the background, you see the chain ferry, and that's the new iteration of it, the one that's called the Diane. One of the things I like about this is you're actually looking at it as if you're sitting on the ground. Because you wouldn't see it exactly that way if you were standing. And that's what I love about it, because it pulls you up, and you've got people here that sort of give you the feeling, that it's round. That there's a back to it, because you see two people up on the top or inside the little pavilion there. And that really kind of pulls your eye, but you get the feeling that it really is solid, that it's a building, it's not flat looking. And here's another one that Peg Sanford just gave, and this is an Emily Parks. This is viewing the big pavilion. This is a watercolor. Kind of wonderful mid-century. I mean, you really get that right after World War II, and this modernism. It's so typical of what was done out at Oxbow in that period. And I'm going to guess she probably studied with Chapin, with Francis Chapin, with this, just from the use of color and the way she's approaching it. But you love it in the foreground. You are this person. Okay, and she does this wonderful job by showing you his back. And you are the person looking across to Saugatuck, to the pavilion, and beyond. Really, really wonderful. I love what she does with that green coming down the middle. Just, that play of light, and to give that idea that the water moves. Really, thank you, Peg, for giving that, because this is really wonderful. This is interesting to me because of all the artists that painted in this area, William Greason is my personal favorite. I really, really am crazy about his stuff. He was Canadian, born in St. Mary's, Ontario, and then became an American citizen. He worked a lot in Detroit, so he had a connection to Detroit, which makes sense. He also had a studio in New York for a while, though. And he ran a school at the foot of Center Street in Douglas for several years with his wife. Jerry Becken was the one that told me the story. When he was a kid, he used to take water to the Greasons. And they used to come in a big Airstream every year, and they would park that Airstream on the bayou, and that's where they lived while they were operating the school. The building's gone. I can't even find it. Well, yeah, I have seen one picture of it. But supposedly there was a lot of really neat art graffiti on the inside, and we can't find pictures. Maybe they'll show up sometime. And I guess the one was of dogs playing cards. But anyway, this is one called Riverboats, William Greason. He lived from 1888 to 1945. The donor was the first president of the Women's Club. And this lends that whole theory. They were trying to create a small museum, so they were slowly giving probably was the best things they had. This is a marvelous painting. And one of the things that's interesting about Greason, this is one of the few paintings of his that doesn't have a moon in it. Almost every painting there's usually a boat in the front, and usually there's a moon, and he does it so that he can put these lines to show the reflection. He was real good at doing that, so he would put that in a lot of them. I don't know if that's here or not. It's possible, that it was painted here or not, because you look at that, it looks like a mountain, but is it a dune? And then I see sheep in the background, and I'm not sure. This is Birch Trees on the Hill. This is to show that his wife Pearl was very competent as a painter. She lived from 1892 to 1968. The reason I gave this, or that we gave this to the Women's Club, is because we think that's the Bolton House. And that means that would be the birdhouse over there. That would be Spear Street. coming at the end of Spear Street. Another thing about this that I find really, really fascinating, notice that it's obviously fall, but it's not just because, she's got kind of purple almost, but that shows the red trees. But notice she's painted the leaves falling. You actually, you're getting the feeling that it's windy. It's just kind of wonderful the way that's done. And here again, she does this little bird bath in the front. If that bird bath weren't there, you would almost fall off the painting, if you know what I mean. You've got that little road going there. That kind of anchors the foreground. It lets you know that there's space in front. Wonderful, with the hill and then the little housetops kind of poke up over the hills. And this, how do you even describe this? This is, again, William Greason. Honestly, I think this is one of his best paintings that I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot of them. This is the old swing bridge. Now, it's his view of it because the swing bridge actually was wider, you know what I mean? So it's his take on it. There's that structure I told you about that you could see in the back of that photo. So, that's why I think that gal was going the other way. That little house was on the causeway. That was the bridge keeper's house. When they needed to turn the bridge, somebody had to live there so they could do the crank or whatever it was to turn it. Here's what I was talking about earlier. There's the boat in the front of the Greason, and see the moon and the reflection coming down. Because actually, what you're looking at is you're looking at Saugatuck. He didn't bother to paint it all in. That's the direction you're looking. But this is so typical of him. Here's another thing that I think is fascinating about this painting. He's doing this weird contrast between warm and cool colors. Notice how cool the water is, all the blue, and then all that orange. Because it's sandy and it's not really great dirt, but it's just this wonderful contrast between the two. And of course that curve really, gives it some dynamism. I mean, you got to go up there to get on that bridge. This is Temple Way, Albert Krehbiel. Again, we don't know who gave this. Albert Krehbiel lived from, 1873 to 1945. You can see kind of getting toward modernism. A lot of his stuff almost looked like plaster when he would paint. And he did teach out at Oxbow for a while, but the story is that they asked him to leave. And that's a really interesting story because I talked with some people in Chicago, some historians, and they believe that it wasn't Krehbiel that they disliked. They didn't like Dula, his wife. But the story is that they left a letter on his pillow, that you're to leave. Someday that whole story will come out. But he opened his own school on the Saugatuck side. Jane Van Dis was one of his models. I don't know if you guys know that. And she told the funniest story one time where she said, I posed nude for him. Of course, I had a bathing suit on. She was fun. But this shows you, the snow. And this would be out at Oxbow at a place where that they call the temple. Kind of a really neat spot. Two new additions we're going to talk about today. This is Chantilly Morning, Kathleen Markland. And I put contemporary on there for her because she's sitting right here. And I'm glad she's contemporary. But anyway, Kathleen told us that she painted this out her front door one morning, obviously in the wintertime. And I want to point out, this is on that desk back there. This does not do it justice. Okay, you have to, when you see it, this is really beautiful. Wonderful, wonderful use of those greens and grays. And that's what I love about this, is because the color is so controlled. Really, really wonderful. This is a portrait of Peggy Boyce, and Peggy Boyce was a member here. We talked about her earlier. That painting of hers of the pavilion is hanging over here. And this was done by John Polka. John Polka was a local. He actually was born in the United States, in Indiana, and was raised in Nazi Germany. It's really a story, really a story. They came back after the war, and he started a studio here. His stuff is the most unusual style. And what's so wonderful about it is, it's his style. I mean, when you look at this, it's just a couple of paint strokes, and it's a portrait, and they work. The best part of this, when you go to see it, it's out in the hall here. Take a look at what he did with the eyes, because he puts this white in the eyes, and it's almost eerie when you look at it, because you're looking at this modern grouping of brush strokes, and the eyes they're like real, but not in a creepy way. I mean, it just really, and I think what it does is it gives a focus to where she's looking. I'm real glad that that's here. I really, for two reasons. Number one, because there was, well, maybe three reasons. There was no John Polka here. So now, John Polka was really well known here. It's good that there's one in the collection. Number two, this is a member. And I think she was a president at the time. So, I mean, it is so, as I said, specific to this collection. It really belongs here. And I'm glad it's going to live here now. So how can I help? Well, I already did. But how can you help? The Friends of the Saugatuck Women's Club is the 501c3 that we talked about earlier. And they're happy to take donations anytime, but especially for the Art Restoration Fund, if people can give to that. And I think that's it. So I'm going to turn it back over to you.